May I?
So my
Yeah. So we are live on YouTube, so this will be available for anybody to watch later as well. So we're starting by listening the expectations of the participants or what the participants would want to get through this workshop. Yeah, someone was trying to speak.
thanks,
Yeah, go ahead,
yeah, my thoughts similarly goes with me. I have some kind of idea about design, but not about thinking. Like design thinking, I haven't read or I have no idea about. So I'm like looking for some new information. And what are your thoughts on design thinking? That's why I came.
Okay, so you're curious about what design thinking is about, so you joined.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Insha.
Yes, so the intention behind joining this workshop was that I wanted to gain more insights of user experience and how to implement design thinking, because this is very new to me. Like I have never heard this before. You said it yesterday. So I want to gain more insights, and I want to help people to make products that will help them to gain to make products that will be good for users, for user experience.
Okay, so now let me do a bit of an anticlimax. So a lot of perspectives were like, I want to build products. Even Sumit was like, okay, I'm not a product guy, but I still want to know products. So I came here and so on. Let me bring in a bit of anticlimax here and say that today's workshop, we will not discuss products. We'll discuss design thinking. Let's discuss design thinking from a more fundamental level. As I've mentioned in the 6th point in the teaser, that design thinking may have started off as a product manager's toolkit. When design thinking started, maybe it started to help product managers. But today, design thinking is way beyond that. It's like taking an aeroplane and driving it on the road. So design thinking is not just to make products. Today, design thinking has evolved as a CEO's strategy lens. So as I mentioned, a small tagline beside the workshop. What is the tagline? Anyone? There's a little tagline.
Design as a way of life.
Exactly. Design as a way of life. So today's workshop will be useful to you if you consider yourself a human being. While you eat your food, while you talk to your friend, or any little activity you do in life, that activity can be better if you're a design thinking fundamentally transforms how you go about your life and the kind of decisions that you make. It can, in general, improve the quality of life and relationships that you have. So I hope that you'll have a better perspective of life after today's workshop on, design thinking. So a little bit of history. Design thinking started off in Stanford University. Two Stanford professors came up with this concept of design thinking. And now we will first explore philosophically what is design thinking, right? So as I mentioned in agenda point 1, that design thinking can be seen as a combination of synthesis and analysis. What is synthesis? Synthesis is combination of lot of little blocks. So when you're playing with Lego blocks, as a kid, if you played with Lego blocks, those building blocks, and if you're trying to make something new, you're engaging in synthesis. You're combining pieces to make something new. Synthesis is different from application. In application, you use robotic procedures, you follow them and you do something. So you draw a duck using standard rules, that's application, it's not synthesis. You bring something new into existence which never existed before, that is synthesis. What is analysis? Analysis is when you break things into little blocks. So as a little kid, maybe when you were a toddler, you'd break a lot of things. Why do toddlers break things? Because toddlers want to understand how things work. That is analysis. Breaking things into fundamental blocks to understand how each block works is analysis. Assembling those blocks back together is synthesis. Now, design thinking is a very clever process which blends both the approaches, where we break something into fundamental blocks and we also harness those little blocks to bring them together to bring a larger picture. So we will go through design thinking in today's workshop. But as you understand more and more about design thinking, what you'll realize is design thinking is a combination of analysis as well as synthesis. That's one way of looking at design thinking. Another way of looking at design thinking is there are certain approaches which scientists use. If I'm a scientist and you ask me to believe something, I will look at data. Unless there is data, I will not believe something. If you tell me that people with spectacles are smarter, I'll want to do an experiment and see if people with spectacles are indeed smarter or not. And even if the experiment does prove that people with spectacles are smarter, I will again question was it mere correlation or was there a causation? Because correlation does not imply causation. If all yellow colored shirt people are getting good marks in exam, it does not mean wearing a yellow shirt gives you good marks in the exam. So that is the scientific rigor. So scientists have that scientific rigor usually. They don't believe things directly. They want data to back up their beliefs. So there's merit in learning from scientists on if I have a certain belief system, can I validate my belief system with experiments? Can I subject it to scientific rigor? Now, artists again have certain approaches. Artists use intuition very well. Artists have that iterative evolution, that if you're making a painting, you don't make it in one shot. You're continuously trying to improve that painting or sculpting. You're continuously trying to bring that perfection, right? That iterative evolution, as we call it. So in design thinking, we have this philosophy: iterate fast, make mistakes fast, evolve fast, learn fast. Let me repeat that for you. Iterate fast, make mistakes fast, evolve fast, learn fast. So if you're a design thinker, you're not scared of mistakes. You actually enjoy mistakes. You learn from those mistakes. If you're a design thinker, you believe that your solution would not emerge with one shot. You believe that you'll have to do multiple versions before you get your solution. I'm not talking of products. I'm talking of anything in life. Probably, you're trying to learn how to cook a dosa. And if you're a design thinker, you're not disappointed if your first dosa is like, burned down. You're like, okay, that's a part of the process. And you try to then analyze, okay, maybe I've put this dosa for too much amount of time. Then next time you go and you take the dosa out and the dosa is very raw. Then you're like, okay, maybe I left it for too little amount of time. Then you slowly, iteratively, you learn the judgment of, okay, when to remove the dosa from the pan. How to, or then slowly you sort of get that judgment. Okay, what is that indicator which tells me when I'm supposed to remove that dosa? Can I just turn it around here and there and see if the dosa is ready or not? So you iteratively learn. Now, this is something which typically artists sort of learn. So design thinking borrows inspiration from both scientists and artists. It borrows that rigor from, scientists, and it borrows that artistic, approach, right, of how you approach your work from artists. So one way is you can say design thinking is a blend of synthesis and analysis. Another way is you can say design thinking is a combination of a scientist's outlook of life and an artist's outlook of life. So if you're both a scientist and an artist, there's a very high chance that you're a design thinker intuitively, instinctively. Okay. And the third thing which you can sort of say about design thinking, of course, design thinking is user-centric, problem solving. So it's like, okay, what is user-centric problem solving? I'll go to the story. I have one story which I've been telling for the last 6 years and I never changed my story. I use the same story for talking of user-centric problem solving. So there's somebody who's designed a women's safety app. So a woman tries to use that women's safety app. So there's someone chasing her. So she takes out the app. She's trying to use the app. The app asks, what is your father's name? What's your grandfather's name? What is your address? What are your hobbies? What was your degree? When did you graduate? And all of that questions it asks. So you all are like, who the hell designed this app? And you can be sure that it's a man who designed the app, right? Okay. So now, one thing in design thinking is when we solve problems, we think from the point of view of the user. Now, a lot of times, you might say, what does that mean? You should always think from the point of view of the user. What it means is, a lot of times we try to use our own convenience. We make a product which is convenient to us, or we say that I can't give all those features because budget will increase or something like that. But if you're a design thinker, you will say all of that is secondary. Budget, does a market for it exist? Will the user understand? All of that are secondary. What is important is what is good for the user. Is this good for the user? Will the user be able to use it? The user is at the center of the entire problem solving process. Now, let's say you're trying to come up with a good training workshop. You say that the user will not be interested in this, but this is good for the user, so I'm doing it. Then you're not a design thinker. If you're a design thinker, what you would say is, this is good for the user. The user needs this, but the user is not interested in it. So can I first get the buy-in and then get into this? How do I first get the buy-in before going into this? Because the fundamental assumption in design thinking is the user is at the center of the entire process. Whatever I do, I am doing this for the user. I am not important. The user is important. The user is at the center of the entire process. Now, when you say this academically, everybody would be like, yes, user is at the center of the process. But the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When you actually go into solving the problem, are you prioritizing the user or are you giving all your excuses? Because the real test is when the rubber hits the road, no? When you're in the real world situation. Now, let us say you're a coach and you say, no, user is at the center of the process. I will give good coaching to everyone. And finally, when you're giving coaching to the person, let's say a cricket coach, you're giving coaching to the person and the person is not properly skilled and you don't give proper match practice to the person because you say the person doesn't have enough skill. The person feels disappointed that I didn't get match practice. You'll say, no, but this, but that. Then you're not engaging in design thinking. Design thinking is tough because life gives you a lot of constraints. In life, there'll be a lot of constraints. You will not have unlimited resources. Within those constraints, how do you keep the user at the center of the entire process? That is extremely important. And this is not easy. And in many ways, it will sort of become a very, very utopian idea. Matlab, good to talk, but difficult to practice kind of an idea. In many ways, it becomes like that. But the whole practice of design thinking is in figuring out that how do I still go find a solution for this? I want to give this power to the user. I want to equip the user with this, but my user is at the center of the process. How do I make it convenient? How do I make my user want this and so on? So I hope by now you realize design thinking is relevant to each and every person in a company or each and every learner, not just to product managers. You're a salesperson, design thinking can help you, empathize with the user and be a better salesperson. You're a teacher, design thinking can help you connect with your students and, conduct your class in a way where the students are at the center of the entire process, not the curriculum, not your syllabus deadlines or anything else, but the student is at the center of your entire process. You're an operations person. Again, you'll keep your employees at the center of the process, not your deadlines. Usually operations people are the most inhuman people in any company, right? If you've seen the series TVF pictures, there you would remember Yogi Bhaiya. So he catches someone goes and gives him data. He says, I don't want data, I want graphs. Then he catches the fellow who's right in front of him, gives him the sheet and says, give me graphs for this. Then the person says, but I'm a legal person. Then the guy turns around and says, objection, overruled. You get the joke, right? He says, I don't care who you are, give me the graphs for this. So that's how usually your operations people are. They just get the work done. And sometimes they don't care about the people or the emotions of the people. So you'll probably have more empathy and you'll put people at the center of your entire process if you use design thinking to do this. All of you, please keep your videos on. In my workshops, if you're not able to keep your video on, you can follow this live on YouTube. There's also streaming live on YouTube. So yeah. So that's the first point was the philosophy of design thinking. So it's a combination of analysis and synthesis, and it's like you're borrowing some ideas from a scientist's approach to life, and you're borrowing some ideas from an artist's approach to life, right? And it's about keeping a user at the center of the entire process. So the 6 pillars of design thinking, we will see that later. We will first, and as I told you the story already, It initially started as a tool for product managers, but today it is a strategy tool which CEOs need to shape a good, strategy. Now, before going to the 9 steps of design thinking, I want to, I think in the 9 steps of design thinking only we will discover scientific prototyping and scientific diagnosis. So that 9 steps of design thinking, if you want to visualize them in a simple way, it boils down to only 2 steps: scientific diagnosis, scientific prototyping. And there are 6 mindsets or 6 pillars which you require to be a good design thinker. We will see that towards the end of today's workshop. So as long as you have that mindsets and you understand scientific diagnosis, scientific prototyping, I think you can engage in good design thinking. And let me also put this disclaimer right at the beginning, that it is not like design thinking is like step 1 karo, uske baad step 2 karo, then you do step 3, then you do step 9 and so on. Design thinking is a non-linear process. You will keep moving from one step to the other in a very chaotic process, but you are learning in a step-by-step thing just to understand the evolution of how it goes. But you might just go in a random order, right? So initially you learn the rules like a master and later you will break them like an artist. Initially you learn these rules like a master and break them like an artist. See, today as a design thinker, when I build products, you will tell Tarun what kind of a hypocrite you are. You taught us step 1 to step 9 and you're starting with step 6, or you're starting with step 9 and then going back to step 1. That's how, again, as I said, you learn the rules like a master and break them like a artist. I hope you guys got why I made all these statements at the beginning. Because design thinking is not just about learning one tool or learning one technology and saying, I know this tool, I know this technology. Design thinking is a mindset. You become a much more amazing leader. You become much more amazing human. With design thinking, you can be a better brother, better sister, better husband, better wife, better boss, better leader, better politician, better teacher, or anything. You can be a better human by using these principles of design thinking, because design thinking can guide you for better decision making and better problem solving. You can look at design thinking as a tool for problem solving. You can look at it as a lens for decision making as well. Right? So I hope you've registered the philosophical perspectives, and hopefully I'll repeat this again towards the end, because maybe now they'll not make sense, but once we do some story-based discussion on the 9 steps, these will make more sense to you towards the end. Okay. So now let me move to step 1 of design thinking. So now when I go back to that story of that mobile app developer who's made that women safety app, well, if you are an app developer, what would you do? You need that information about that woman, but you're taking that information during the crisis time. What would you do if you are the app developer?
I think have an automatic location feature, so that they just tap and we get the details of that location, so that we can.
Fair enough. You take automatic location feature. Yeah, Satya.
We can make it so that all of that things are asked when you download that
during the onboarding journey,
or after the crisis is over.
Yeah, during the onboarding journey. In design, we call it onboarding journey for a digital app. That is, you're slowly getting them introduced to the application, right? The first few steps were like a tour and so on. That's called an onboarding journey. So during the onboarding journey, you can take that information. Valid point. Yeah, Aman.
So maybe we can integrate a feature by which we can send the notifications to the concerned departments automatically whenever she maybe presses some kind of button.
Okay. You can have a
and get her location. So that process will be done after getting the location of that person.
Okay. Yeah, Aryan.
You could ask that after the situation is done.
Yeah, if she has not given the data already, you can ask later. Need not get it right away. Yeah, Tarva.
We could add a feature where the phone has buttons, right? So like volume buttons, and also if she presses the volume buttons like 3 to 4 times rapidly, a notification with alert will be sent to her parents and then to the concerned authorities.
Fair enough. Valid point, Atharva. We will do a psychoanalysis of this shortly. Very good point. Yeah, Insha.
Yes, we can like after downloading the app or whatever it is, that person the location will be traced automatically, and just by tapping a button, an alert will be sent, and that woman can fill the details later. For now, for her safety, the alert will be sent just by tapping a button, so that it won't take much time.
So you want to reduce the amount of that. Thank you, Insha. Yeah, Satya.
We can make it so that the app automatically can take all of the user's information from any other account, like maybe Google or Apple account.
Fair enough. Which is why today a lot of apps let you register through Google, Facebook, or something. Okay. Now, one very important thing is, Atharva, you wanted to add something else as well?
No, sir.
So now one very important thing we all have to recognize, I mean, from all your reflections is, if the app user empathized with the girl, the user would keep the journey as short as possible. I mean, the process as short as possible, because when you're in crisis, you don't have that time. Now, one question is, if the girl is in that crisis, what will be her emotional situation in general for most people?
Paranoid, anxious, panicking.
Will the girl be in a situation to act?
It will be very hard to act in that situation.
So as a design thinker, what would you want to do then? When it's very tough for her to act.
I think maybe have a quick shortcut to how she can voice command and avail features, so that.
What if she's in a shock and she doesn't even talk?
What if we can sense how the body reacts, like the heart rate, the pulse?
Fair enough. Yeah, Arvind.
I would probably say keep the options very simple and probably have a very big alert button or something like that.
Okay.
So it's like it's like a no-brainer button.
Okay. Yeah, man.
Just a suggestion. Maybe we can enable the camera that might connect to the family member, so that she can have a conversation. That might be done automatically. Maybe we can try
Good suggestion. Yeah, Satya.
We can connect the security cameras that are on poles or buildings, so that the cameras use facial recognition to understand.
But how do you get the information that she's in danger if she's in a shock and she doesn't act?
Well, maybe the security cameras can sense something weird is going on.
Then you're not trying to build a mobile app for her. You're trying to build an AI algorithm, image recognition algorithm from the CCTV cameras to recognize. That's a very tougher problem. Okay, but that's also a valid suggestion. Yeah, Aryan.
We could track how she's behaving using the mobile.
Exactly. If you find something unusual in her behavior, like her heart rate, or she's running and the camera is shaking a lot, then instead of asking her to tell to trigger, you can ask her to tell not to trigger. As in, if you are not in danger, press this button. You get the plan. So if the phone is shaking a lot, then the phone automatically vibrates and says, okay, I'm sending a alert response to police station and all these people. Please press this button if you're not in danger. It automatically talks loud. I'm just thinking aloud. I'm not saying this is the only option. I mean, this can lead to a lot of false alarms. And maybe what you can do is, to the police and others, to a control room, you can give the CCTV feed or maybe the mobile camera feed through which someone can manually check if she's in trouble or not. Because that will save a life, right? But fundamentally, the problem which you're solving is of inaction. Because you know that if she's in shock, she may not act. So your shock itself has to be your trigger. You have to recognize, you have to find a way to recognize that shock. So all of this, when does it come in? When you empathize with the person, right? When you empathize with the person, you put yourself in the shoes of the person, and then you know what are the assumptions, what are the ground rules under which you would solve the problem. So the first step of design thinking is to empathize with the user. Now, what is a natural question you would ask me if I say that empathy is very important in design thinking and you've got to empathize with the user? What is a natural question you would ask me?
How do you?
How would we empathize?
Exactly, the how question becomes, because I've answered you the why, so now the how comes in. So one hack I have for you, and something which Don Norman writes this in his book as well. So Don Norman says there's a difference between the marketing approach and the design approach. See, how does a marketer understand consumer trends? See, both the marketers and designers both are interested in consumer trends. But the kind of information a marketer wants and the kind of information that a designer wants are little different. Marketer usually relies on surveys and those kind of statistical tools to get behavioral insights of users. But a design thinker looks at observation. So if I'm a design thinker and if I'm making an app for you, I'll probably stay in your house for 3 days. I'll go wherever you go. You go to eat a burger, I'll go sit right next to you. You're eating your burger, I'll look at you. I'll look at whether you're smiling, you're happy, you're frustrated, you're irritated. You watch a movie, I'll look at you. I'll see when you're kicking your sofa, when you're not kicking your sofa, what all you're doing. Try to observe you very, very closely to understand who you are as a person. Design thinkers are obsessed about their target audience. Let me tell you how I, as a design thinker, did my homework before even incorporating Deep Thought EduTech Ventures. I went into 4 schools and offered teacher training services to 4 schools. I would sit in the staff rooms along with teachers and see what they were doing in the staff room. I would sit in classrooms. I would observe how teachers were teaching. I would teach myself. I got into the life of a teacher. I got into the life of a student. I did a lot of interactions with them to understand their life. My idea was not to get information. My idea is to get their vibe. My idea is to feel what they feel. Feeling is a higher level of intelligence than thinking. So when you can feel for your end user and when you can feel your user, you, I think, are more equipped to solve the problem. So a design thinker doesn't just operate at the cognitive level. A design thinker operates at the emotive level, where you can feel the emotions of your user. Can you feel the pain of your user? Can you feel the anxiety of your user? Can you feel the aspirations of your user? Can you feel the excitement of your user? Can you feel the ecstasy of your user? If you can feel the ecstasy of your user, you will respect that experience which has produced that ecstasy. Okay, let me go over this again. If you can feel the ecstasy of your user, you will respect the experience that has produced that ecstasy in that user. Otherwise, you'll be like, what's wrong with this fellow? Why is this fellow getting overexcited and all of that? But if you can really understand what experience has induced that ecstasy, you will do multiple things to produce that kind of experience multiple times. Because you know that experience is inducing ecstasy in the user. So one very, very important thing is, one very important thing to realize here is if you're a good human being, you're a good design thinker. You don't need to pay 1.5 lakhs, 2 lakhs and do a product management course and all of that. You're a good human being. Because the most basic thing is, can you have that human to human connect with the other person? That I think is the first pillar. So the first step which you do is to get familiar with your target audience for whom you're building your product. You try to get into situations where you can get acclimatized with their life. Let me give you an example. Ashton Kutcher did this film Steve Jobs in 2013. So to understand the life of Steve Jobs, Ashton Kutcher started behaving like Steve Jobs. One thing which he did was he also changed to the diet of Steve Jobs. He started eating only fruit because Steve Jobs had a fruitarian diet. So these are the things which you can do. You can go to a different extent to ensure that you relate with your end user. Like, let's say, this is not just for product, okay? You're a politician. You're trying to do something for your people. You go eat, dal roti in the house of Dalits or in the house of the so-called weaker sections. You're slowly getting to understand the life of a weaker section, what they go through and so on. That can help you empathize. Or you're the CEO of Uber. You're the CEO of Uber India. You drive a cab yourself and try to understand the ground level situation. You're empathizing with the users. So you can do multiple things to, sort of empathize. Empathy is the first step in design thinking. How do you empathize with the stakeholders? Not just the end users, but different stakeholders who are connected with the problem you're trying to solve or the decision you're trying to make. Yeah, Aryan.
How do you make sure that you're not kind of faking that you are thinking or living like them and actually doing that in order to get insights?
So keep reflecting multiple times, keep having transparent, candid conversations with them. Try having tough conversations. And let me give you one drill. So how do you know that if you're winning the trust of the stakeholders or not? One drill which I do with people is I get on a phone call with them and I ask them, tell me 10 things about me which you do not like. So if a person can tell me that, it means the person trusts me. If the person says, no, Tarun, you're so good, you help me all the time, you're such a nice person, your teaching is so good and all, then I know, okay, this person is scared of me. There's no human in this world whom everyone likes for everything, right? There are always shades of every person which people do not like. So if you're able to induce that trust in people, and if people are able to share that candid opinion, they will be able to tell you those occasions when you probably could not empathize with them and could not understand the problem of theirs.
I have a follow-up question to that. So if you are actually faking it, then why would you even do the drill?
I'm assuming that you don't want to fake. And I'm saying that if you have natural empathy, that's when you can be a good design thinker. Not artificial, cosmetic empathy, which you bring in just to appear socially correct.
But you cannot actually fake empathy.
You can fake empathy.
There will be a big determinism. You will be able to judge that person.
No, there are a lot of people who can fake empathy without being discovered.
Politicians do that all the time.
Yeah. And relationship managers are trained on that. I mean, you talk to a bank. Hi, Mr. Sumit, that's so nice. Oh, we're so happy for you. You know the person is not happy for you. There are some people who, see, the ones who really succeed as good relationship managers, right? They're really happy for people. They really like to serve people. Their main objective is to serve people. They succeed as good relationship managers because they like to serve people. As a nurse or a relationship manager, you try to pick people who really like serving people, who are happy when people are happy, who find their happiness in happiness of others. But I mean, artificial empathy is taught widely in corporates. I know that's a little disappointing, Sumit, but yeah, that's
but by time you will definitely be able to judge that.
If you're a psychologist student, maybe yes, but if you're a lay person, not that easy. If you're in a very tough situation, yeah, maybe, because true colors come out, but in general, they can get away with it.
So if you're driven by your emotions, then it's tough at that moment, I guess.
It's a zero-sum game, you know. I'm faking it and you're the one who's receiving. So either I win or you win. You detect it, you win. You don't detect it, I win. And as Saurav said, politicians do that most of the time.
I guess that went to the process of manipulation.
Okay.
Somewhat.
Okay, we're going on a tangent. Let's not worry about the people who fake it. Let's worry about ourselves and our problem solving and our decision making, right? So the empathy is something which needs lifelong practice. No matter how much we practice, there's still so much of scope for us to, empathize because people are different. And again, one way of practicing empathy is to engage with people who come from a very different background than that of yours, from a different geography, from a different culture, different religion, different gender, right? You talk to such people, then you'll slowly, because I think one very important thing in empathy is to come out of yourself, to come out of Sumit, to come out of Insha, to come out of Aryan. So I think if you talk to people who are very, very different from you, that can really help you come out of yourself and see from another perspective and to embrace other perspectives. That I think is very, very important for a design thinker. This is step one. Now, I mean, one is to have empathy as a personality trait. That is one of the 6 pillars. Now, but what I'm talking of is step one, where you can empathize with your stakeholders. So for that, I think what I'm saying is spend some time with them, do some activities with them, maybe behave like them, get into situations. All those kind of drills can help you, get into their life faster. So there are 2 aspects of empathy here. One is empathy as a pillar, That is in general a personality trait. Other is empathy pertaining to that problem or pertaining to the domain where you're solving the problem. So empathy as a step, what you do is get into situations and talk to people and so on, so that you know your stakeholders well, you know the life of your stakeholders well, you know the emotions of your stakeholders well. Got the first step? Yeah, Aryan.
So let's say like you really want to empathize. The thing is that you know that you can't empathize right now. So let's say do that drill of kind of conversing with different people. So couldn't that also have a negative effect that you could feel proud of yourself? You know?
Yeah, that humility becomes very important. I mean, if you're a person who truly empathizes, you know that you cannot actually empathize, you're only trying to empathize. That humility would always be there if you have genuine empathy. But again, Aryan, design thinking is always work in progress. You'd empathize, you'd go to other steps, and again come back to step one, you're saying, okay, I need to empathize a little more. So design thinking is that non-linear, chaotic sort of a process. Okay, now let's move to step two. Step two is possibly the most important step in design thinking. In step two, what you do is you define your problem, or you define what is the decision you're trying to take, a problem or decision. You define that. Now, I'll give you an example. In 2016, when I was doing a workshop, a set of girls in 11th and 12th, they were solving a problem, and they came and they told their problem statement, problems of the girl child. Their problem statement was problems of the girl child. Then I heard them for a while, I cross-questioned them. Then I came up with a new problem statement. Here, this new problem statement which I came up with. Frustration over aspiration for a male child not being met. Frustration, comma, over aspiration for a male child not being met, comma, being rubbed off over the female child. Let me go over this again for you. Frustration over, comma, aspiration for a male child not being met, comma, being rubbed off over the female child. What difference do you see between problem statement 1 and problem statement 2?
There is more clarity. There is more clarity. Like you have gone more one layer deeper. Like what's exactly happening. The first statement was a little bit shallow. This one is more little deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, Aryan.
Like you're going to the root cause and you're not only seeing the situation from one perspective, but you're taking all the people involved in that and then
okay, root cause analysis comes later.
I think
yeah.
I think it is more targeted, like it's not as broad, like one specific thing. Yeah.
So I'd like to make two points. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Krishna.
I see it as three different problems. Being not met a boy is different. Then having a girl is different thing, and another what you have said for is different. So it may be different reasons for different. I think as a reasons, or I mean.
So let me make 3 points here. Point number 1. Defining the scope of your problem is very important. That's what Rohit was saying. You know, your scope is too broad, you're in trouble. You're trying to do too many things. Your scope is too narrow, again, you're in trouble. You're not relevant. You're doing something too insignificant, right? Your problem has to be large enough so it is relevant. If you say that I would help all the men wearing red colored t-shirts with a height of 172.5 centimeters living in urban, setting in a 1 BHK flat who do not know how to speak Hindi. My app is meant only for them. Gets too narrow, right? People are like, why should I even fund your app? Why should I even build this app? It's too narrow. It's not relevant. I mean, if the scope is not big enough, the world doesn't care about your solution or decision. So you'd want it to be large enough so it is relevant. But again, you want it to be small enough so you can focus. These are fundamental heuristic, okay? Large enough so it is relevant and small enough so you can focus. And this is a very important principle to remember in life, that whenever you're solving anything or doing anything, knowing what the scope is. Because if your scoping is not done properly, you suffer. Because either you take too broad a scope or you take too narrow scope. Either ways you suffer. Too narrow scope, you're not relevant. Too broad scope, you can't focus. So first thing with respect to define is the scope. The second thing with respect to define is words shape the way you think. The kind of word you use. If you use the word exploit, or you use the word use, or you use the word leverage, those three words have a different psychological effect on you. So if you are able to come up with a statement with the right words, that will drive your mind in the right direction. So that's why in general, whenever you set an agenda for anything which you do in life, it's important you use the right words to write that agenda, because then your brain will be directed in the right direction. Because words influence the way you think. As I said, one is when you define your problem statement, the scope has to be carefully defined. The second thing is the words which you use actually shape the way you think. The psychology is influenced by the words. So use the right set of words to define whatever you're wanting to do. And the third point which I wish to make is, a lot of times there's a gap between your intention and your words. The words you have written and the intention you have in your mind is different. You intuitively want something else, but what you're telling is something else. So you go tell the person, I want this, but intuitively you want something else. Let's say you're going to a chef and you're asking that chef to make a pizza for you. You intuitively want something, but you told the chef something else. The chef makes something else and you get disappointed with the chef and you say, the chef is bad. But the problem is not that the chef is bad. The problem is there's a gap between your intent and your content. So when you write your problem statement, it's very important that your problem statement, the content of your problem statement matches with that intent in your head. I hope you understood the three principles with respect to define. One is the scope which you're defining, right? And the second is the words and the psychological impact of that words which you're using. And the third is that gap between intent and content. So writing your problem statement properly, I think, is 50% of your problem solved. If you have an articulation of your problem, 50% of your problem is solved. If you can articulate your problem, 50% of your problem is solved. Yeah, Aryan.
What do you mean by the right words, and how do you find, like, what are the right words?
So, I mean, let's say if I tell you that people are disappointed with this, people are frustrated with this, does your understanding change with both the words? Here it is tone. So there you have to understand if your words are actually capturing the exact situation which you have.
Then how does it differ from the third point?
Yeah, in a way, 2 and 3 kind of overlap. But see, 3 is a little beyond articulation. 3 is you checking whether there's a gap or not. 3 is because a lot of people make this mistake, they feel the other person is not understanding them. But what they need to understand is there'll always be that gap between the intent and the content, and how do you bridge the gap is something you have to think about. I would say 2 is more on the articulation front and 3 is more on the communication front. In the communication front, you have the opportunity to dialogue, you have the opportunity to do multiple things which ensure that your intent is reaching the person. In a way, all 3 are the same, right, Aryan? In a way, all 3 are about writing one sentence in which you capture the problem statement.
And how do you find the right word in the second?
So yeah, there you start asking questions. How should this problem statement influence me? What kind of psychological impact does it want on me? And then you ask questions like, how do I induce that kind of psychological impact? And there you search for words.
So are you kind of pointing out to only, like, in that psychological front to the most priority, or are you just giving an example here?
No, the priority is one thing, but in general, how do you want to perceive something? Do you want to perceive it to be happy? Do you want to perceive it to be sad? there are a lot of things, right? How you want that to be perceived, that your words can control. This is why companies spend millions of dollars writing that mission statement, because that mission statement unites all the stakeholders together. The clarity comes to everybody if that agenda is spelled out in clear words.
Like the proper way of conveying it.
It is not about conveying, Sumit, it's about defining. Because when you define, you're stating an agenda, why you are doing that. Am I doing this activity to seed a discussion? Am I doing this activity to solve problems? Am I doing this activity to create impact? All the three agendas look similar, but they're different. Creating impact, engaging in innovation, having a discussion. Three very different things. So you stating the agenda for a group of people, that affects the future course of action, how people are going to go about it. The definition shapes how you do things. And see, Satya Nadella says that, leadership is about meeting untapped, unarticulated needs. You are a leader if you can articulate for the voiceless. There is somebody who has a problem. That person is not able to put the problem in the form of words. You are the one who's able to go and put it in the form of words. Then you're a leader. If you can articulate it for other people, you're a leader. So being able to articulate your problems, or being able to articulate what is that place where you're indecisive is, I think, a very important thing. That's why articulation and having a command over your writing becomes very important for a leader. I hope you guys get why I'm saying this step is probably the most important step in design thinking. Because this sets the agenda, this tunes your mind, this directs you. This channelizes your energy. If you can articulate your problem, 50% of your problem is solved. Most of the cases, people struggle because they don't even know what the problem is. In one Telugu movie, one person says that I'm fighting an enemy which I can't see. So that's kind of what it is to solve a problem when you don't have an articulation of what the problem is. Again, I re-emphasize that be it empathy or be it define, these two things are valid not just for problem solving, but also for decision making. Design thinking is not just a problem solving tool, but can also be a decision making lens. Okay. Now moving to step 3. Step 3 is need finding, where you empathize with your user, you define your problem. Now you go out to, find the needs of your user. What does my user really want? You talk to your user, you observe your user, you find the needs. Then you'd also do kind of root cause analysis, right? You can use Toyota 5 Whys technique. That is, you ask the why question at least 5 times. It's like, I ask Satya, why are you getting a headache? Satya says, I'm getting a headache because I didn't sleep. I ask Satya, why are you not sleeping? Satya says, I'm not sleeping because I'm under stress. I ask Satya, why are you under stress? Satya says, I'm under stress because I don't think I'll deliver my project on time. I ask Satya, why do you think you can't deliver your project on time? He says, because I'm not able to plan properly. Then I ask Satya, why are you not able to plan properly? He says, I don't know how to plan. So then you do the root cause analysis and realize the reason why he's not able to sleep properly is because he doesn't know how to plan properly. So you tell Satya, okay, enroll into a project management course and learn it, you'll get your sleep on time. Now, when I talk about root cause analysis, one very important thing in the design philosophy is you don't solve the symptom, you solve the root. And one very important principle to remember is when you talk to your customers often tell you the symptoms. But it is your job as a problem doctor to understand the root. People often tell you the symptoms, they don't tell you the root. It is your job to do this 5 Whys technique and find out the root. I explain root cause analysis through this story. Let's say there's a pipe in your room which got broken and there's dirty water which comes and falls on your table every day. Satya goes and cleans the table every day. Is this an efficient decision?
No.
You'd rather go fix the pipe, right? So this is why you don't fix the symptom, you fix the root. And one important remark to make here is when COVID broke out, initially the treatment we had for COVID was only symptomatic treatment. You were treating the symptoms and there was wishful thinking. You were praying that it will go away. But there was no treatment for the root of it itself. But in general, in problem solving, one heuristic or principle is you'd want to, treat the root problem and not the symptoms. And another important principle is when you talk to users, often users tell you the symptoms, they don't tell you the root. And you as a design thinker have to be aware that, okay, maybe I'll have to go discover the root and so on. So I hope you realize design thinking is like a master course of life. You have to know a lot of philosophies and a lot of principles and use them at the right time, at the right place to get this right. So in a way, design thinking is nothing but maturity. Right? You knowing all those little hacks and deploying them at the right time. So when it comes to need finding, we do root cause analysis. We talk to users and find out if they really have the need or not. And when you do the diagnosis, right? So you come up with a scientific hypothesis. Let's say you come up with a hypothesis that students today are not able to manage multiple activities together. And students are disappointed because they're not able to manage multiple activities together. You came up with this hypothesis. Then you need to design an experiment through which you can scientifically prove that what you said is not your hallucination, but a fact. So then you got to go talk to Aryan. But again, if you talk to Aryan and Aryan says, yes, I'm not able to manage my time, that could still be Aryan's opinion. So then you ask, what is that scientific experiment I can do to tell that Aryan is not able to manage his time properly? So then you might want to do an experiment, which is like, you take 5 students and 5 students, 10 students who are very similar in thought process and ability and all. 5 students, you teach them how to plan. Other 5 students, you don't teach them anything. You put them into situations where they're given a lot of homework. They go into a lot of hobby classes and so on. And you see the students who are taught how to plan and the students who are not taught how to plan. And if you feel that if your data points that the students who are taught how to plan were happier, there again, you need a way to measure happiness. If you have a way to measure happiness and you find that these people are happier than the others, and these people are able to accomplish more tasks than the others, then your hypothesis is right that students do not know how to plan. I'll give you another example of experiment design. Somebody said that, let's say somebody says that the root cause of accidents on one road are street dogs. How do you know that street dogs have led to those accidents? So what you can do is, set up, like go to Ramoji Film City. It's like Film City, right? World's largest film production facility in Hyderabad. Go there, set up one set, okay? Put that road, put hoardings, make a film set. Make one more set which is very similar to this set. If you have a Salman Khan hoarding here, also have a Salman Khan hoarding there. Because you never know. Maybe that Salman Khan hoarding is depressing people. So you want to have everything identical. You have pebbles here, you should have pebbles there. Make everything identical. Here you put street dogs and here you don't put street dogs. And you ask bikers to go on both the roads and you measure the number of accidents. But then how do you know if bikers here are skilled and bikers there are not skilled? You do a driving test and make sure all your 10 bikers are the same skill. How do you know if it's a random error? You make the bikers go multiple times so that if there's an error, it averages out over repetitions. So this is how you design experiments to test if your hypothesis is true or not. So learning experiment design is also probably an important thing in design thinking because you want scientific data to check if what you're thinking is true or not. So what are the 3 things which are coming out of need finding? One is you do, root cause analysis. Second is you do scientific diagnosis. That is, you check whether whatever, need you found for the end user, is it your hallucination or does the user really have that need? That's an important concept. And the other concept which I said is in need finding, you generally tend to do a root cause analysis to go to the root of that problem. These are 2 concepts under need finding, which I can say. So step 1 was empathy. Step 2 was define. Step 3 is need finding. Step 4, a very interesting step. Step 4, a very interesting step is called benchmark. In benchmarking, you ask who else is solving this problem, how are they solving this problem, and how effectively they're solving this problem. Now, why do you do benchmarking? So that you don't reinvent the wheel. If there's already a solution for your problem, why do you want to go do that? Implement that existing solution and solve those problems which are not already solved. You discover what is already known. You discover what is already solved. So one very important thing we do in benchmarking is literature review, right? So go read whatever literature is available around this problem. Whatever information is already available in this problem, read about it, understand it, so that you can, as Newton said, stand on the shoulders of the giants. Newton said this, right? I can see farther only because I can stand on the shoulders of the giants. Only when you study several thinkers before you, you will be able to see that problem with greater clarity. So in benchmarking, what we do is we try to study the existing body of literature which we already have around the problem. So we can start off from there rather than starting from the scratch. Okay, now I'll pause and take some questions about whatever we did so far, because so far all the 4 sections were in the problem segment. Questions?
While
Sorry.
yes, Rohit, you can go.
Okay. What criteria would you use while you're fetching literature? Like, we have to think about reliable sources, I believe. So
absolutely, you'd want reliable sources, and you'd want to find situations which are very, very close to the kind of situation you are trying to solve for. So that's relevant, because you need to recognize that here you're not doing research, you're doing problem solving. So you don't want to burn too much of your time. You don't want to get into analysis paralysis. So you want to pick up information which is highly relevant to your current situation. You'd want to understand, you'd want to initially skim through that literature and evaluate if that literature is relevant to what you're doing. And it is here that having a mentor can be helpful, because usually when you spend some time with a mentor, you learn that art of how do you pick that literature to read. So one very important thing which I can recommend is, whenever you're doing literature review, find your articles, send them to your mentor, and get your mentor's suggestions on whether those are relevant articles or not. Once you do this activity with your mentor for a decent amount of time, slowly you'll also learn how to pick articles to read from, because that takes some practice to get the judgment of what article is relevant to you and what is not. So the apprentice model is sort of helpful here. If a mentor can guide you in getting the judgment of how do you check whether that's relevant to you or not. Giving a motherhood principle can be tough, but for a specific situation, a mentor can help you.
I'm quite curious on how people would actually check for reliability of a source. How would anybody check for reliability?
You see, is it published in a peer-reviewed journal? How many people have cited it? The impact factor of the author, the credibility of the author, and so on. And these days, you have a lot of fact checkers in case it's fake news. Fact checkers can help you. Yeah.
So like as you said that you could kind of go from one step to another, like in chaos. So if you are going from let's say step 2 to step 4, but you haven't ever done the step 3, so how would you actually do that? Let's say that.
So you already defined your problem, right? You'll start, you in the define step, you already defined your problem. So you start reading about different people who worked on this space, right? And you start reading how they work, what are they doing, and so
on. In the step 3 also required at some time to do the
step 3 will make your life a little easier, because you'll be more focused in what you read, because you know what are the particular needs which you're solving. You don't do step 3, you'll be solving for a wide variety of needs which come under the ambit of your problem statement. Within your problem statement, there could be a lot of needs, right? So you could probably have a razor sharp definition if you do that need finding step problem. And after step 3, you might go back to step 2 and redo your definition if you realize that that's actually not a need and it was your hallucination.
And regarding kind of jumping to another step, so what could be the reason to kind of jump to another step?
As I said, let's say in step 3, you realize that there's no need for it. you might go back to step 2 and say that, okay, I'm going to change my definition. Or you realize this is an audience I don't understand, I don't want to work. You'll go back to step 1 and maybe try to empathize with them, or maybe again start a new process and a new problem afresh.
And for
There
going
could be multiple triggers for why you want to redo something. You discovered something and then you see a need to redo a process which you did before, so that might be a reason for a jump.
And could you give an example for going forward?
So let's say you're empathizing with a user and you know that some NGO has done a lot of research about that kind of users. Let's say you're working on transgenders and you know some NGO has done a lot of work on transgenders. You may want to first do benchmarking, read about it before going into the definition or anything else. So that could be, you feel that benchmarking is very, very important, so you jump to that. Because you know in each step what you're doing and you intuitively know the importance of what it is, so you might jump. It's like each step, one step is like a scissor, one step is like a blade, one step is like a cutter and all of that. So you kind of intuitively know when you're going for which one, right? Which tool you're going at each step.
And do you also
practice that intuition and that instinct sort of, get fine-tuned.
Okay, so while you're just practicing right now, so could you kind of go with the intuition as you want, or you have to still learn like a master?
In general, I'd suggest that you go through the process, then you'll practice all the steps and understand all the steps well. Once you understand all the steps and once you internalize the steps, then you can always break them like an artist. Right now, you try to break them, you'll get caught in a lot of trouble and you lose confidence and eventually give up on design thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, man. All of you can pose your questions at once. I'll take all 3 at once, okay? Okay, all 4 can go at once. Yeah.
Can
Please
you
go
just say in general terms that a design thinker is a scientist? So if we can say so, then what was the need to generally make the term design thinker?
Practices from arts as well, right? So a design thinker is a user-centric problem solver. Design thinking is one particular way of engaging in user-centric problem solving. Some of the scientist toolkit is used by a design thinker. Yeah, Insha.
Yes, while empathizing with users, we'll be dealing with different users, like be it geographical backgrounds or regional background or anything like that. So all of them will have different perspective. So how to get on to the conclusion, like how to define the problem then, because it is possible that one person may think it's a problem and the other may think that it's not.
That's why within that sample group which you talk to and which you interact with, you'd want to maintain reasonable diversity. So you're not biased towards one particular trait. Your sampling has to be done properly. In statistics, there's a concept of sampling, right? So now let's say, Insha, I come to your college and I try to study the kind of students in your college. I pick some 10 students who are very notorious and say that your entire college consists of notorious students. Would you be happy about my impulsive judgment?
No.
The problem was in my sampling, right? Like if you see the exit polls, which people do, they pick up a reasonably heterogeneous sample and they pick up a sample which is kind of like a microcosm of the larger population. Microcosm as in it has this similar kind of characteristics like the larger core. So by studying the sample, you're able to study the larger core. So you'd want to pick up a sample which is diverse and whose distribution is similar to the distribution of your larger core. Like in your larger core, if you have 70% men and 30% women, in your sample also maybe you'd want 70% men, 30% women and so on. I mean, that's one way of doing it. So it goes back to how you choose your sample to study.
Okay, like it should be balanced, is it?
I'm not saying balance. I'm saying your sample has to be as close to your real population. Because if you're studying a skewed sample, your perspective will also be skewed as in distorted in one way. See, let us say you're trying to study Netflix users, whether Netflix users are happy or not. You're only talking to those users who are unhappy with Netflix. So then you will have a skewed opinion that users of Netflix are in general unhappy with Netflix. If you have a skewed sample, you'll get a skewed perspective. So you'd want to have it boils down to choosing your sample carefully.
Got that.
The sample has to come close to your real thing, right? Let's say in an exit poll, I go and interview only youth and ask whom they voted, and based on that, I say, okay, this party is winning. But in reality, some other party may have won. Because I didn't choose a proper sample. Maybe youth all went to this party, but other demography went to the other party, and the demography was bigger, and so the party won.
Yes, fair enough. And
little bit of knowledge of statistics can be useful. Little bit, first course of statistics can be useful, so that you understand sampling, how to pick samples.
And there were 3 main principles of finding the need. So can you please repeat them?
Only 2 I said. One is you do root cause analysis. That is the 5 I's technique. And there I said that, users will typically tell you the symptoms, and it is your job to find the root. Users will typically tell you the symptoms, and you can use the Toyota 5 I's technique of asking the why question at least 5 times to go to the root. And the second thing which I said was
hypothetical something.
Yeah, that how do you know that what you're thinking is not your hallucination? How can you conduct an experiment to check whether what you're thinking is a real need or not? Because with a lot of startups today, one big problem is, they think users have a problem and they build an app and they do a lot of things, and later they realize that that's not even a problem. Establishing that that's a real problem is a very important thing to sort of do. This step is common to lean startup method and also design thinking method. Even in lean startup method, we first try to establish the need and then we build the product.
Thank you.
I mean, if design thinking is one method which you can learn as a product developer, lean startup is another very important method which you can learn. Maybe next Sunday we could have a workshop on lean method. Yeah, Arvind, and then we can go to start.
You said that users show symptoms and we should find the root cause, right? What if users are showing incorrect symptoms, right? For example, like you ask why people are stressed, and they say that I don't have free time for myself, and you think you think the root cause is that we should give more free time for people, but we can actually find a better solution. Might be like they have the free time, but they're not able to effectively use the existing free time. So that can also be that. So, but the solution that you thought could solve, but was not hitting the problem on correct, right? So how do you know whether the people are giving the right symptoms?
2 things there, Arvind. One is users usually can only describe their symptoms unless they're trained to be design thinkers to go to the root level or trained in root cause analysis. So that was my point, that not that users can always report their symptoms correctly. So when we cross-question them, I think using the Socratic method properly and trying to bring that logical rigor to evaluate, what they're saying, I think can be useful. Like you can do a consistency check, right? Cross-question them in different ways. And by cross-questioning them in different ways, if there's inconsistency, that shows that there's something going wrong. But if the answers are consistent, maybe it's getting right. That's point 1. Point 2 is when you're doing the scientific experiment, the data will anyway tell you whether the diagnosis is correct or not. Through root cause analysis, you've done a diagnosis. Through the experiment, you check whether your diagnosis is correct or not. It's something like this. I'm a doctor. I've done a diagnosis that you have a stomach some problem. How do I validate my diagnosis? I will send you to a diagnostic center, ask you to take a report and come. Through the experiment, I will know whatever diagnosis I did is correct or not. So whatever you are doing through the root cause analysis, you will run an experiment and see whether what hypothesis you came up with is a legit one or not.
Got it.
Yes, Saurav.
Can you elaborate on why 5 times question? Like why 5 times only? Can root cause can be found at even 6 or 7 values?
So that's a general thumb rule, nothing, not a hard and fast rule. But the idea is generally you hit the root after asking a minimum of 5 questions. There's a general hack, but not that you have to subscribe to it or something like that. But in general, it's a nice thing to go beyond 5 because you'd have gone into the real root. Otherwise, you're just scratching the surface. But sometimes maybe you're very confident with the third question itself, you would have got it, you can stop.
Saurabh, I guess you can use fishbone analysis. Ishikawa diagram you can refer to if you want to get to the root cause. If 5 eyes are not possible, you can use fishbone analysis.
Thank you, Shravan.
Fishbone analysis.
Yeah, thank you, Shravan. Okay. I have another question.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
As you said that empathy is a lifelong process, like you will keep evolving, improving at it. So can you describe some method that we can use to improve empathy?
One, as I said, is you can talk to people from different backgrounds, right? Because one very important thing in empathy is you being able to come out of yourself. So interact with people of very, very different backgrounds, so very different from you, ethnically, geographically, culturally, and so on. So that could help you come out of yourself and see things from a different perspective. And maybe get into tough situations, get into uncomfortable situations with people. That will also maybe help you empathize. And another thing is, whenever analyze all your disagreements carefully. Because a lot of times we disagree because our expectation or our version doesn't match with the expectation or the version of the other person. So disagreements, I think, can be a great source of empathy building. You would have impulsively you would have disagreed, but when you go back and introspect, maybe you would have learned a lesson of empathy that maybe the other person was experiencing something, not that the other person intends evil for you, but because the other person is coming from a different background. That person did that and you did this, and that can be a great way of building empathy.
But as due to limited time, we can't experience all those things. Can also reading stories or listening to or watching stories can also help in empathy.
Sure, but I think empathy can be learned more with practice than just reading.
You're trying to empathize with the character.
Yeah, but for me that doesn't sound real. For me, that feedback loop is more real when there's an emotion involved. If you can empathize with the other person and the person has really got it, or you were able to make the person feel comfortable or something, you get that emotional feedback loop which tells you that, hey, I got this right, and you continue doing that more and more. For example, okay, let me give you an example. Yesterday night, I was hungry, and the person who cooks in our house, she was talking to her grandchildren. I was really hungry. I walked there. I realized the moment she sees me, she will hang up the phone and serve me food. My parents were away, and I didn't know where they kept the food and all of that. So, and I thought even if I try to serve the food in my plate, she'll hang up the phone and she'll try to serve me food. So instead, I just walked back into my room and I was just trying to think about something. And I went back there when she actually finished that call, because I realized she doesn't talk to her grandchildren that often, and I didn't want to, interrupt her. Now, this to me is a practice of empathy where I'm trying to sort of understand what that emotion is for her, right? Because she's trying to balance two emotions. One is she wants to, take her responsibilities very seriously, that, she's at her place, she's got a certain job, and she also understands my lifestyle, that morning 6 o'clock, say night 9, I'm continuously at work, and even while eating my lunch, I'm at work doing some Zoom call with someone and eating my lunch, and also, my food is usually served on time and kept in my room in one corner so that I take it and start eating, because otherwise they know I'll never go and eat. So I had to empathize a bit because I know she's talking to her grandchildren, right? So when you do this, and at the end of it, she finished her call, she was happy, you see her being happy. That gives you a kind of accomplishment that, okay, I was able to see happiness in someone. That to me is a practice of empathy. Empathy is learned more through practice than through reading, I would say. I mean, reading can definitely give you good perspectives, but real learning comes with practice when that emotions are exchanged.
Tarun, when we speak of empathy, we have like emotional empathy where you're actually feeling what the other person is feeling. So you share feelings, and the other we have intellectual empathy, which is you're just imagining how the situation is like for the other person. You're not really feeling it. So in design thinking, what empathy would you employ, or is more advisable to be employed? Or is there any such rule?
So I would say that the feeling level empathy is gold, because that drives your decisions in the right direction for the user. But in the absence of the feeling level empathy, which can be tough. For example, let's say I'm talking to a Finnish guy and I'm trying to build a product for Finnish people. So suddenly that feeling level empathy for Finnish people can be tough, because I tried speaking to one Finnish guy and then realized it was very tough for me to read his body language. I couldn't empathize. I mean, generally I take pride in my ability to, read the other person's emotional state and empathize by seeing their eyes and all. But then that day, I think my pride was broken and I was humbled when I could see that. I thought the guy was kind of upset, but later I realized that is a natural body language of a Finnish person, because Finnish don't really express themselves as much. Which is why I said if you can interact with people of different cultures, that can, build empathy. In Europe, some countries people don't talk much. Some countries people are warm. Yeah, Russians also, they don't talk much, right? So I think if that feeling level empathy stuff, then maybe I will have to resort to, intellectual empathy, where I read and try to base my assumptions based on what I read rather than what I feel. But feeling level empathy is like a different level altogether, if I can get there. And to achieve that feeling level empathy is the drill, what I said in the beginning, right? Spend some time with the target group. Do some activities with the target group.
Could emotional empathy, like feeling what the other person is feeling, could it also be exhausting and draining? Because let's say you're studying a group that is suffering and you feel that suffering and it exhausts your cognitive resources.
Rohit, again, I think that's subject to your emotional intelligence. If you can stay composed, and not get attached to anything there, I don't think it'll be draining. I think it will be very, very enriching, because you'll feel like a better human after doing something there. So it's subject to whether you're able to hold your emotions or you're getting carried away.
Okay.
It's not easy when I get drained, but I've noticed that the occasions where I was staying emotionally composed, those emotions actually nourished me. They didn't drain me.
Okay. Got
it. So that's that kind of emotional intelligence which I personally try to practice. Can I get into that situation where more often it nourishes me than drains me? It's tough, but that's the aspiration for me, right? To practice that emotional intelligence, and I wish the same for you too. Yeah, man.
So I just want to know that how to basically judge that a person is a good design thinker, or just say like empathy is a never-ending process. For example, so let's say back in the times when there were cars without ACs installed, for example, and generally a person comes and sees that there is a problem that drivers generally in summers that all sweating starts. So he just come up with an idea and installs an AC in the cars. After that, there are many things like people say that ACs are not good for health. So after that, we come along with the bad effects of ACs, or let's say social media. Initially, that was basically built to connect to people, but now we can see that it's basically disrupting our lives. So can we just say that people are a bad good design thinkers, or it's just the empathy which is are you getting it?
I get your question. So Aman, let's understand one thing, that there's always scope for improvement. So whenever we solve any problem or whenever we make any decision, We would have taken the decision based some assumptions, right? So in your situation of AC, maybe that information that AC is not good for health was not factored into the model initially. So whenever you solve any problem, right, Aman, you first create a model and you solve within that model. And that model consists of all that assumptions and all that knowledge you have about the situation. And it is quite common that, you know, we make modeling mistakes. That is why as a design thinker, we do it in an iterative way. Because when you go implement that solution and see if the solution is working or not, you talk to people, you'll understand flaws in your model. When you understand a flaw in your model, you'll update your assumptions in your model. And when you update the assumptions in your model, you will look for an alternative solution which accommodates the requirements which you have. Does that answer your question? In both your cases, I see it as a modeling problem, that some information which was to be taken into your model was not taken because that information was not known. Which is why, see, even in deep thought, right? I mean, before the technology team gets in, the TPMs do the business modeling. We understand the situation, we do the business modeling. We try to make a business model. This is our user. This is what our user wants. These are the constraints of our user and all of that. Once the business model is ready, then we try to think of solutions. Then the technological model is made and then the software is made. So, but one very hard piece when you're engaging in deep tech innovation is the business modeling, how you do it. What all information you bring in, you know, what all assumptions you bring in into the model.
And let's say that empathy is a kind of a never-ending process, or it's unachievable.
Yeah, I mean, it is because yeah, it's never attainable, never achievable kind of a thing, but you would try to get better and better as you tread on that path, right? So there's nothing such as a ideal product or, you know, the best product or something, because if you look at nature, there are way too many variables than what we can model. There are way too many variables than what you can model. Like if you look at your AC, health hazard is a variable which is out of syllabus, came out of the blue. So when you do real world problem solving, the biggest problem with real world problem solving is there'll be new variables which you didn't factor initially. Which is why we engage in iterative problem solving, because when we do iterative problem solving, the new variables might come in future iterations. So the thing is, you take all the variables, it becomes too complex, you don't know how to solve. You take too few variables, it becomes a toy problem. So there's a trade-off of how much complexity I take, how many variables I take from the real world. I take too many variables, it's real, but it becomes very difficult to solve. You know, one of my physics professors used to say, unfortunately in physics, we assume a spherical cow. He said, unfortunately in physics, we assume a spherical cow. You try to assume a real cow, it's very difficult to solve the equations. But you take a spherical cow, it's far from a real cow. So do you want it to be real or do you want it to be simple? You have to balance that thing somewhere. You model it very, very accurately, solving that model becomes very tough. You make the model very simple, solving is easy, but that model is far away from reality. Otherwise, Aman, think about it, with data science, ML, AI and all of that, every problem in the world should have been solved right now, no? Why is it not being solved? There is a modeling problem there. Because you take models, you fit that models with reality. Because what you can solve is models. You can't solve reality. You can solve only models. You need to find a model which comes close to reality and then solve the model. With that model, your algorithm or product and all those things work. The challenge is in modeling there. And this is exactly why physics, maths majors can have a huge future going forward, because physics, maths teaches you modeling or even philosophy. How to work with models. Yeah, Ritika, I think she's been waiting for a while.
Yeah, so my question is like, if they're in a room, there are 3 people and one is sweating and other 2 are like, one is a doctor and other is just a normal person. So if and there's a fan switched on. Okay. So the one who is sweating, he says that I'm feeling hot or something, and there are like, he's sweating. So the doctor over there will say that he must be having some problem, because he'll think it that way of his. He won't directly say, like he can easily say that he's also sitting in that room and he isn't feeling hot, but he's sweating. But the other person, like he said, that will switch on the AC because we know that it's summertime, so he must be feeling hot. So
So yeah, Ritika, this is a very good problem. So as a design thinker, you'll define your problem that I have 4 different people in the same place who have 4 different needs. So how do I come up with a solution which has a differential approach to the 4 different people? Then you start searching for solutions accordingly. So what kind of a solution do you want? I want a solution where air reaches the fellow who finds it hot and air doesn't reach the fellow who doesn't find it hot. So then you might want a IoT based micro fan kind of system where little fans are there in the car, where the fans only show up near the place where the person wants it. Now, but this is an expensive solution. Then you might want to think of some other innovation where the objective is the fellow who wants the air should get the air, the fellow who doesn't want the air shouldn't get the air. I mean, I'm not telling you a solution right now, but I'm saying this is the thought process we would take. That can I find a system which can only give air in selective places? Then we solve the problem accordingly. The other day, so someone asked, design thinking is just scientist thing, why a special name? Aman, so here is your thing. Design thinking is a creative process. So you have to come up with a creative solution which can just come, you know, it can come out of a 4th grader kid also, who comes up with an idea of how you will send air only in one place and not in another place, and so on. Or maybe just give a mask to the fellow who doesn't want the air. Simple solution. Right? Like in 3 Idiots, he tells that, right? Somebody, they invent a pen and he says, why don't you just use a pencil? So creative solution can just blow you away. I mean, sometimes, you know, just too unstructured the way you come to it. Aryan and Arvind, I'll have to apologize. I'll move to the next segment so that we can wrap this up by 4 o'clock. So as you can see, I spent most of my time on explaining the problem solving, the problem understanding part. Because as I said, if you can articulate your problem, 50% of your problem is solved. If you understand your problem, most of it is done. The solution part is usually pretty simple. See, one mistake which a lot of problem solvers do, forget design thinking, I'm talking of problem solving in general. There are various ways of problem solving, of which design thinking is one way. Okay, one mistake which a lot of problem solvers do is they spend more time on thinking of solutions rather than understanding the problem. You want to be a good problem solver, one simple principle to understand is spend more time to understand the problem, not to solve the problem. If you understand the problem really, really well, solutions will come. I would spend 80% of my time just trying to articulate my problem, understand my problem, document whatever I know about my problem. Once you breathe your problem, once you are soaked, immersed into your problem, finding solutions is usually a lot easier than what people think. Because you'll be intuitively operating around it. Okay. So step 5 is ideating. You have done your benchmarking. You already while doing your benchmarking, you would have seen what different people have done. That will trigger some ideas in your brain. So you come up with some ideas. You ideate. You come up with some ideas. Then step 6 is prototyping. Whatever ideas you came up with, you do a small experiment to test if that idea is really working or not. Similar to scientific diagnosis, you set up an experiment with a group with your solution, a group without your solution. Control group and experimental group. Let's say you came up with a tablet. You give 5 people the tablet, that's called the experimental group. 5 people you don't give the tablet, that's called the control group. You'll see the difference between the control group and experimental group. If both control group and experimental group, the result is the same, it means your tablet didn't work. Let's say you came up with a magic drink through which people can run faster. You take 10 people who run with identical speed and you give 5 people the juice. You give 5 people, you don't give that 5 people the juice. You make them run and you do that race a few times and you see if the speeds are similar or there's a significant increase in the speed of the people who drank the juice. So that's how you set up an experiment, right? The control group, experimental group, you set up that experiment and test whether your idea which you came up with really helped or not. Now, why do you do this? You may come up with a lot of ideas. Generally, when we come up with an idea, there's a bias. Whenever we come up with an idea, we think that our idea will always work. There's always that bias. So to overcome that bias, we'll do a small experiment to see if that idea has worked or not. So that's the prototyping part. The ideating part is when you come up with a lot of ideas. So if you're a UI designer, how is this relevant to you? You'll come up with a problem. Your user has a certain problem. Then you think of an interface. You think that this interface is a solution. Then what do? You come up with 2 or 3 solutions, 2 or 3 interfaces. You give it to people and you see whether it has really solved their problem or not. You look for scientific data. As someone said right at the beginning, A by B test or something. So A by B test is just one of the many ways of designing an experiment to evaluate your hypothesis. But fundamentally, what you need to know is that my hypothesis could be wrong. What I'm thinking could be wrong. So can I do a scientific experiment to validate what I'm thinking? Like as Arvind asked earlier, right? That I've done some diagnosis. My user has misguided me. How do I know? So you do your experiment through the data, you will know. So it's important that you spend some time learning scientific rigor as well, so that you know what you can believe and what you can't believe. I'm not doing that today because that itself will take me about 2 hours to teach experiment design, scientific rigor, how you probe things properly and so on. But yeah, learning scientific thinking can really help you. And again, that scientific rigor is what you import from science. And that iterative evolution and that emotional dimension is what you're importing from arts. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, in the MVP method, you again do scientific testing. The Eric Ries lean method, you do the scientific testing. So, and today a lot of companies use the MVP method. I mean, Eric Ries has popularized it globally. Okay. Again, lean method is a dedicated topic. I may take about 2 hours to just teach the lean method. And as product managers, I think learning the lean method is again very interesting and important. Okay. So step 5 was ideating. Step 6 is prototyping, and step 7 is implementing. So you ideate, you prototype. Sorry, ideate, prototype. Step 7 is choosing. From all the prototypes, you choose one prototype which you think is the best one. So you ideate, you come up with a lot of ideas. Then you prototype, you test all of them. Then you choose one of them. So when you choose them, you've got to have proper reason, and you may want to debate with a few people on what is the best choice and what is the scientific data you have and so on. Right? And step 8 is you implement whatever you chose at a large scale. Because in prototype, you would have done it in a small scale. So step 8 is you implement it at a large scale. And step 9 is you repeat this whole thing and you learn from this entire process. Step 9 is you learn, you reflect on this entire process, you learn. Then after step 9, again, you come back, you repeat the cycle. So let me draw the steps for you.
Step 7 was implementing or step 8 was implementing?
So you ideate, then you prototype, you go through the logical thing, right? You come up with a lot of ideas, you experimentally test them, that is prototyping. Then after you experimentally test them, you choose one of them. Then after you choose them, you implement the one which you chose, and then you learn. Now, when you do need finding, right, you would list a lot of problems and you narrow down to one problem through your experiment. And when you do ideating, right, you list a lot of ideas as solutions. And with prototyping and choosing, you nail down one solution and implement it. You see 2 diamonds, right? That's why design thinking, this is called double diamond approach. You list a lot of problems, you diverge with a lot of problems, you converge to one problem, which you think is the most important one to solve. You diverge with a lot of ideas and you converge to one solution. Diverge and converge, it's a double diamond approach. Yeah, I'll take like 5 questions before moving to 6 pillars of design thinking. Questions around the solution part only, please. Yeah.
Tarun, in the choosing part, we say that which prototype, we ask which prototype do we go with. However, they could also be a blend of prototypes. Can we like pull apart parts and put them together?
You could do that too.
Step 8, I have a doubt. What's the need of it in design thinking if it's more about iterating?
Sorry?
What's the need of implementing whatever your solution is in the large scale if it's more about iterating?
Can you go over this? Sorry.
So what's the need of implementing your solution in the large scale if design thinking is mainly about iterating your solutions again and again?
Step 9 is learning from the whole thing, right? You reflect on that whole thing. What all have you learned by doing all this?
Okay, I was referring to step 8. Actually.
Yeah, so whatever in the prototyping phase, you would have only done a small prototype, right? So in implementing phase, you do full scale implementation.
So like, is the design thinking covering the whole thing of problem solving?
As in?
Like the whole process, like mainly you depend on design thinking while problem solving?
Yeah, in a way design thinking can be a self-sufficient tool to engage in, problem solving.
Okay.
Okay, now let me go over the 6 pillars of design thinking. One pillar is curiosity. As a design thinker, you've got to be asking a lot of questions, and I hope today's workshop showed you why it is important to ask questions, because there are always some new variables which should pop out while you're trying to improve the principles, right? There's always something which you're missing out. Another pillar is empathy. Empathy not just as a step, but because you see empathy as a personality or as an approach is very useful. And optimism, that a lot of times when you become cynical, right, you induce a lot of constraints and you give up on thinking of ideas, or you may think that this is not practical and you might give up. So while you're doing, see, a lot of times what happens is while you're doing the process, you just don't feel that you'll get there, but miraculously at the end of the process you come up with an amazing solution. So that optimism or the belief in the process is very important. See, one difference between an amateur and a professional design thinker is the optimism. The amateur gives up midway saying, this problem is too tough, I don't think this can be tackled. I think a pro has to solve it. But what the professional has is optimism that as long as I follow all these basics, eventually I'll be able to get there. Because initially a problem appears too big, too giant. But when you follow all these principles, you would have broken it enough and that insight will hit you at some point. So one pillar is curiosity, one pillar is empathy, other pillar is optimism. And ambidextrity, that is balancing exploration with exploitation. You have an idea, you want to be exploring multiple ideas. You want to be trying multiple ideas. But while you're trying multiple ideas, if you know one idea has merit and if you know that idea has to be tried out, you want to exploit that idea completely. You want to make full use of that idea. So balancing that exploitation, the depth and breadth balancing, right? They say that T model, right? Balance of breadth and depth. So breadth in the sense that you're exploring multiple ideas, depth in the sense that you're exploiting one idea. That balance is one of the pillars of design thinking. And teamwork, because again, while we do this entire process, we want different people who bring in different perspectives, who bring in different sensibilities. So teamwork again becomes a very important aspect of design thinking. And the last one is creativity, because while I tell you all the steps, it might sound like it's like a step-by-step, machine operating process. It's not. You define your objectives and you try to come with a creative solution around those objectives. So these are like the 6 pillars which make you a good design thinker.
Tarun, I'm having like a cognitive dissonance right now. In a sense, you talked about the third pillar as being optimism. And I think like I was going through the Stockdale paradox, and Jim Collins was talking about, people in the concentration camp. They were optimists, and these were the person who could not get out of the camp. And also Adam Grant, organizational psychologist, he said that many studies said that optimism is not a predictor of well-being. So
again, here in the context in which I spoke of optimism is, while you're solving the problem, you have to have the continuous belief that this process will, in a way, yeah. See, in a way, optimism is a drug. It gives you false hope, but you probably need the drug when you're in design thinking, because that drives you to do this process with all that creativity and all that faith. Because a lot of times the problem might sound too daunting at the outset. It might sound too daunting at the outset, but when you go into the process, then you might realize, hey, this is actually simple. I'm capable of solving this.
Okay.
Next question.
So could I use the word like informed optimism rather than just optimism?
Yeah. But see, again, the larger spirit of this is to say that you need that sort of belief in that entire process to, go full throttle.
Okay.
Sometimes when you have that self-doubt in you, right, you don't implement all the principles properly.
Okay.
It holds you back. You wouldn't want to, be holding yourself back.
All right.
This is my personal view. Yeah, Arif.
By teamwork, does it mean like a real team, or does it represent communicating with people in general?
Real team, that, this entire process you may want to split with a team and do with a team, because a lot of times one single perspective can be very right?
What do you mean by splitting with a team?
I mean, you split everything with a team, you do it with a team. Like if you remember, whenever Subhadeep was doing UX meetings, he wanted to have a lot of people in the UX meetings for brainstorming, so more perspectives coming, because you don't want to get biased into a few perspectives. Okay. And also, if you have some blind spots, you have a diverse team, there's a greater chance that one of you is, observing the blind spot, right? So having a diverse team with a good teamwork is like having more CCTV cameras which are watching.
Wouldn't it be, could not it also be better with an individual, because they can go faster?
That's the exact thing which I was just saying, that the individual might get biased, the individual might overlook the blind spots. Real world problems are usually complex, so that modeling of this thing becomes very important. So while you want to crack that model, you may want to have that diversity across the table. So if you are missing something, maybe somebody else catches it.
If you are iterating, then couldn't you kind of solve that problem over time?
Fair enough, but then you'll probably need way too many iterations there, because you're unable to unpack some new dimensions of your problem, which can only be unpacked when complementing personalities come into the process.
I didn't quite understand that.
Somebody who has a very different thought process is bringing that layers into your problem. You alone are not able to bring that layer. So you'll probably take way too many iterations to get there, because you're not able to bring that perspective yourself.
It's not
like you're a male person. You iterate multiple times, you'll still probably not understand a female person's problem. But you have a female person in your team. Life is much easier. You pick up that variable then and there. Some female person might be able to spot it. The diversity is a very, very important, ingredient while you model real world problems.
Couldn't you kind of still like design thinking for the sake of iteration?
Sure, you can, but unfortunately in life, you have to deliver products with a deadline. So if you're worried about that, you'll probably want to have a diverse team.
Okay.
Tarun, could you, sorry.
Yeah, Rohit.
Could you once again elaborate on balancing exploration with exploitation?
So exploration is you're pursuing multiple ideas. Exploitation is that one particular idea you're milking it max. You're milking maximum value out of it. Yeah, Ritika.
So like my question was, like you said, optimism. So you said like one is being cynical, and sometimes that person thinks that he might give up and he won't reach the end process. So like it's just because of the lack of confidence or something else. Like,
I would say it's a lack of belief in that process. Sometimes when you go in and when things are not happening now, you might feel this process is too theoretical, this won't work and all of that. So you lose faith in the process itself.
So this can happen in design thinking, like you can lose belief on yourself.
In yourself and in the process also. You may, and a lot of times when you lose faith in the process, you start taking shortcuts. You will avoid that experiment to check your claims, or you'll avoid that benchmarking of seeing who else is doing. You'll avoid a lot of things when you lose that optimism in this, right?
Tarun, I have one question. In design thinking, can design thinking happen even if we do not employ all the 6 pillars? Like, is it a strict rule that all the 6 pillars should be there in design thinking?
See, Rohit, you can look at design thinking like a strict process which you follow word by word.
Okay.
Or you can look at design thinking like a philosophy, like a fluid philosophy. So this is like a system of thinking. So this is like a combination of different principles.
Okay.
How you want to deploy it is up to you, right? Why do we have the 6 pillars? You know it. Why do we have the 9 steps? You know it. But how you put it in practice is completely up to you.
Right. Okay.
But let's say you don't experimentally test your hypothesis, then your process is against the spirit of design thinking. Because in the philosophy, one premise you have is, my beliefs could be wrong, so I want to get experimental data to check if my belief is correct or not.
Right.
There is lot of subjectivity here, like in the case of double diamond. Hello?
Yeah.
Like in the case of double diamond, there is a lot of subjectivity, how much to diverge, how much to converge. Similarly with the prototyping. So to bring certainty, we can think of one product. Like one such product is the five questions. Like, yeah. So am I correct? Can we call that a product?
Which one?
I'll do all the research. Like as I was saying, there is a lot of subjectivity here, and to reduce the subjectivity, the one concept we have come up with is 5 why questions. They must have done a lot of research over it. They have.
Is your subjectivity a problem?
Not a problem, but like to reduce uncertainty. Like there is
again,
as you said, if we keep on diverging.
Is uncertainty a problem?
As you said yesterday, if we keep on diverging, like if we don't fix the divergence, there will be an analysis paralysis, right? So how much to diverge?
The problem is not uncertainty. The reason why you do 5 whys technique is, a lot of times what you feel is the symptom, because you feel the pain. Pain comes because of the symptom, but you want to find the root which is causing that pain. When you ask why, that why helps you find what has caused it. You again ask that why. You ask what has caused this. So by the time you ask your 5 whys, you end up somewhere close to the root. That's why we are asking the 5 whys. We're using the 5 whys technique to find the root of that problem.
No. What I meant was to reduce under, like, to how much to diverge. Like one such product is 5 why question is a product. I'm saying it's a product. To reduce how much why should we ask? Like what the ideal number of whys can be? Like they must have done some research and then averaged it that 5 can be.
So the finding is that when I ask 5 questions, I'm likely to hit the root cause. It's not about divergence, convergence and all, but it's about, am I able to hit the root cause? Because a lot of times I might be only finding the symptom. But you treat a symptom, the problem will still come back. You treat a root cause, the problem won't come back.
Actually, I'm talking I'm talking something different.
I get it. I get it. That's exactly what I'm saying. The purpose of 5 Eyes technique is not for divergence or anything. That's the purpose of 5 Eyes technique is to find the root so that we can remove it from the root. Like let's say you're removing a weed from agricultural land. You're removing a weed from agricultural land. You chop it on top, it will still come back, it will grow again. But you remove it from the roots, it will go away. So the purpose of 5 Eyes technique is to find that root so that you can remove the problem from the roots.
I think you didn't get me. I'll explain it again. Okay, shall I?
Yeah, sure.
What I mean is,
can I answer?
What I mean is like,
yeah, sure.
And I see, Saurabh, it's not that you need to only ask 5 times the question. You keep asking till you reach the root.
No, that's not this question. That's
okay.
No. What I'm saying is, like, as you said yesterday, when we diverge, we can go into parallel analysis, right? Yeah. So I'm taking example of as we restricted, not restricted, but ideal wise can be 5. So here to restrict our like the where we can diverge, we can create a such product like 5 Eye techniques. It's one such.
Acha, you want to come up with your own.
We can do research.
Acha, you want to come up with your own technique.
Yeah. That was what I'm saying.
Then you are going to develop your own.
We can do
process.
Yeah, we'll do all the research that needed and we'll average it out. Yeah.
Do that. Yeah.
That was what. Yeah.
Do that. Yeah. Next question. Okay, I'm ending the live session. It's 4 o'clock. So, and I also have a small little ritual, which or small little practice activity for all of you.